Tonight, we step softly into the shadows of an ancient world, not into a battlefield or a council chamber, but into the quiet spaces behind closed doors, where discipline met desire. We're exploring what intimacy truly meant in ancient Sparta, not what Hollywood showed you, but the rituals, rules, and unspoken relationships that governed every touch and every glance. So, dim the lights, let the silence settle, and if you find comfort in the calm unraveling of forgotten stories, feel free to like, subscribe, and tell me where and when you're listening from. Now, breathe deep, because intimacy in Sparta wasn't soft, but it was sacred. Picture, if you will, the ancient city of Sparta in the early morning hours, when the first pale light of dawn begins to filter through the narrow windows of stone houses built for endurance rather than comfort. The streets are still quiet, save for the distant sound of young warriors beginning their daily training, their voices carrying softly through the crisp mountain air. But we're not following them to the training grounds today. Instead, we're moving through the residential quarters, past the austere facades that reveal nothing of the intimate lives unfolding within. This is a world where every aspect of human existence was carefully regulated by the state, where the personal and the political were so intertwined that they became indistinguishable. In Sparta, intimacy was not merely a private affair between individuals, but a civic duty, a sacred responsibility that served the greater good of the polis. The relationships between husbands and wives, between lovers, between mentors and students, all followed patterns that had been established by generations of tradition and reinforced by the unwavering demands of a society built for war. Tonight, we'll explore how the Spartans understood love, desire, and human connection within the rigid framework of their unique civilization. We'll discover how their approach to intimacy was shaped by their military culture, their religious beliefs, and their understanding of what it meant to be human in a world where individual desires were always secondary to collective survival. We'll walk through the marriage ceremonies that were unlike any others in the ancient world, examine the relationships between warriors that were celebrated rather than hidden, and understand how the Spartan approach to child rearing reflected their deepest beliefs about human nature and social responsibility. The Spartan way of life was built on the principle that the state came first, always and without question. But this doesn't mean that the Spartans were cold or emotionless. Rather, they channeled their deepest feelings and desires into forms that served their community's needs. Their intimacy was disciplined, ritualized, and purposeful, but it was no less real or meaningful for being structured by social expectations. In many ways, the Spartan approach to relationships was more honest and direct than what we might find in other ancient cultures, stripped of pretense and focused on the fundamental human needs for connection, companionship, and continuity. As we journey through this exploration together, we'll see how the Spartans balanced individual desire with collective responsibility, how they created space for love and affection within a system that demanded absolute obedience to the state, and how their unique approach to intimacy both reflected and reinforced their distinctive culture. We'll discover that behind the stern facade of Spartan discipline lay a complex understanding of human nature that acknowledged both the power of desire and the necessity of channeling that power toward constructive ends. The ancient sources that tell us about Spartan intimacy are fragmentary and often filtered through the perspectives of outsiders who didn't always understand what they were observing. But by piecing together these scattered accounts, by reading between the lines of official histories, and examining the archaeological evidence that survives, we can begin to reconstruct a picture of how the Spartans lived, loved, and connected with one another in the privacy of their homes and the intimacy of their relationships. So settle back into your favorite listening spot. Let your breathing slow and deepen, and prepare to enter a world where every kiss was a political act, every marriage a strategic alliance, and every moment of tenderness a carefully orchestrated element in the grand symphony of Spartan civilization. This is the story of intimacy in ancient Sparta, told not through the lens of modern romance, but through the eyes of a people who understood that love, like everything else in their world, was most powerful when it served a purpose greater than itself. What was intimate practices really like in ancient Sparta? Chapter 1, A Society Built on Control. Welcome to another journey through the quiet corridors of history, where we explore the intimate realities of ancient civilization. Tonight we travel to ancient Sparta, a city-state that existed in the southern region of Greece, where the very fabric of society was woven with threads of discipline, control, and purpose. As we settle into this exploration, let your mind drift back over 2.5 millennia to a place where every aspect of human existence was carefully regulated by the state, including the most personal and intimate moments of its citizens' lives. The ancient Spartans lived in a world that would seem almost alien to us today. Their society was built upon a foundation of absolute control, where individual desires were secondary to the needs of the state. This control extended far beyond the battlefield or the training grounds. It reached into the most private chambers of their homes, dictating how men and women related to one another, how they formed bonds, and how they expressed their deepest human connections. The Spartan way of life was not merely a political system or a military culture. It was a comprehensive blueprint for human behavior that governed every heartbeat, every breath, every tender moment shared between two people. When we think of ancient Sparta today, our minds often conjure images of bronze-clad warriors standing shoulder to shoulder in perfect formation, their shields gleaming in the Mediterranean sun. We imagine the legendary 300 who stood against the Persian tide at Thermopylae, their courage echoing through the ages. But behind these images of martial glory lay a society of extraordinary complexity, where the intimate lives of its citizens were as carefully orchestrated as any military campaign. The Spartans understood something that many civilizations have struggled to grasp, that the strength of a society depends not only on its armies, but on the bonds between its people, the way they love, the way they form families, and the way they pass their values from one generation to the next. The Spartan ideal of discipline permeated every aspect of their existence, like morning mist settling over the valleys of Laconia. This discipline was not merely a matter of military training or physical conditioning, though these were certainly important. It was a philosophy that touched every corner of their lives, shaping how they ate, how they spoke, how they dressed, and most importantly for our exploration tonight, how they loved. The Spartans believed that discipline was the foundation upon which all human excellence was built. They saw it as the difference between civilization and chaos, between strength and weakness, between a society that would endure and one that would crumble beneath the weight of its own indulgences. This discipline manifested itself in ways that would seem severe to our modern sensibilities. From the moment a Spartan child drew breath, their life was measured against the standards of the state. Boys were taken from their families at the age of 7 to begin their agoge, the rigorous training program that would transform them into warriors. Girls, while remaining with their families, were subjected to their own form of conditioning, designed to make them strong mothers of future soldiers. But the discipline that governed their intimate lives was perhaps even more profound, for it touched upon the very essence of what it means to be human. The Spartans understood that human desire, left unchecked, could become a force of destruction. They had seen other Greek city-states torn apart by jealousy, passion, and the pursuit of personal pleasure. They had witnessed how the pursuit of individual happiness could weaken the bonds that held a society together. And so they chose a different path. They chose to channel human desire, to shape it, to make it serve the greater good. This was not done out of cruelty or a desire to suppress human nature, but out of a profound understanding that the strongest societies are those where individual desires align with collective needs. The concept of control in Spartan society was not the harsh, arbitrary control of a tyrant, but rather the careful, thoughtful control of a master craftsman shaping precious metal. Every law, every custom, every tradition was designed to create the strongest possible society, one that could withstand the pressures of war, the challenges of time, and the temptations that had destroyed so many other civilizations. This control extended to matters of the heart, with the same careful attention that was given to matters of war. The Spartans believed that love itself could be disciplined, that passion could be channeled, and that even the most intimate moments between two people could serve the greater purpose of strengthening the state. In this carefully controlled society, gender roles were not arbitrary assignments, but were seen as fundamental pillars supporting the entire structure of Spartan civilization. Men were warriors, but this designation carried with it a weight of responsibility that extended far beyond the battlefield. They were expected to embody the ideals of courage, discipline, and self-sacrifice, not only in combat, but in every aspect of their lives. Their role as warriors was not simply a profession, but a sacred duty that colored every relationship they formed, every word they spoke, and every intimate moment they shared. The Spartan warrior was expected to be a protector, a provider, and a living example of the virtues that the state sought to instill in its citizens. The path to becoming a Spartan warrior was long and arduous, beginning in early childhood and continuing throughout their lives. Boys were removed from the softening influence of their mothers and placed in the harsh environment of the agoge, where they would learn not only the arts of war, but the discipline that would govern their entire existence. They learned to endure pain without complaint, to face death without fear, and to subordinate their individual desires to the needs of their comrades and their state. This training was not merely physical, but psychological, designed to create men who could function as perfectly coordinated units in battle and in society. But the warrior's role extended beyond the battlefield into the most intimate corners of their lives. A Spartan warrior was expected to choose his relationships carefully, to form bonds that would strengthen rather than weaken his commitment to the state. His choice of a wife was not merely a personal decision, but a matter of state interest, for she would be the mother of the next generation of warriors. His friendships with other men were seen as vital to the cohesion of the phalanx, for soldiers who loved and trusted each other would fight more fiercely to protect one another. Even his moments of tenderness and vulnerability were understood to serve a larger purpose, for a warrior who understood love would have something worth fighting for. The women of Sparta occupied a unique position in the ancient world, one that would have seemed shocking to the inhabitants of other Greek city-states. While women in Athens were largely confined to their homes and excluded from public life, Spartan women enjoyed a degree of freedom and respect that was unprecedented. But this freedom came with its own set of expectations and responsibilities. Spartan women were not merely wives and mothers, they were partners in the great project of creating and maintaining a warrior society. Their role as strong reproducers was not a diminishment of their humanity, but an acknowledgement of their crucial importance to the survival of their civilization. The physical training that Spartan women underwent was designed not merely to make them attractive to potential husbands, but to prepare them for the rigors of childbirth and child-rearing. They participated in athletic competitions, running races and wrestling matches, their bodies becoming as disciplined and powerful as those of their male counterparts. This physical strength was seen as essential to their role as mothers, for weak mothers could not be expected to produce strong children. The Spartans understood that the quality of a civilization's future depends upon the strength and character of its mothers, and they shaped their society accordingly. But the strength that Spartan women were expected to possess was not merely physical. They were expected to embody the same virtues of courage, discipline, and self-sacrifice that were demanded of their male counterparts. They were expected to send their sons off to war without tears, to welcome them back with pride in their victories or honor in their deaths. They were expected to choose their partners wisely, to form relationships that would strengthen the state, and to raise their children with the values that would ensure the continuation of Spartan civilization. The intimate relationships that formed between Spartan men and women were shaped by these societal expectations in ways that would seem foreign to our modern understanding of love and marriage. Romance, as we understand it today, was not the primary consideration in the formation of these bonds. Instead, Spartan couples were expected to choose each other based on their potential to create strong children and to support each other in their service to the state. This does not mean that love was absent from Spartan relationships, but rather that it was understood to be most noble when it served a purpose greater than mere personal satisfaction. The process of courtship in Sparta was as disciplined and purposeful as every other aspect of their society. Young men and women were given opportunities to observe each other during public festivals and athletic competitions, where they could assess not only each other's physical attributes, but their character and commitment to Spartan values. These interactions were carefully monitored by the community, for the formation of each new couple was seen as a matter of collective interest. The community had a stake in ensuring that each union would contribute to the strength and stability of the society as a whole. The intimacy that developed between Spartan couples was understood to be most beautiful when it aligned with the greater purposes of their society. The physical attraction that drew them together was seen as a gift from the gods, but it was a gift that carried with it the responsibility to use it wisely. The moments of tenderness that they shared in private were understood to be not only expressions of personal affection, but investments in the future of their civilization. The children that resulted from their unions were not merely the products of their love, but the inheritors of a great tradition, the carriers of values that had been carefully preserved and transmitted through countless generations. The Spartan understanding of intimacy was deeply intertwined with their understanding of duty and honor. They believed that the truest expression of love was not the passionate abandon that characterized the poetry of other Greek city-states, but the steady, disciplined commitment that could withstand the tests of time and hardship. They valued the love that could send a husband off to war with courage rather than tears, the love that could welcome him back with pride rather than relief, and the love that could continue to burn brightly even in the face of loss and separation. This approach to intimacy created relationships that were characterized by a deep sense of mutual respect and shared purpose. Spartan couples understood that their love for each other was part of something larger than themselves, that their individual happiness was connected to the welfare of their community, and that their most private moments carried with them the weight of public responsibility. This understanding did not diminish the tenderness that they felt for each other, but rather gave it a dignity and purpose that elevated it above mere personal gratification. The societal order that shaped Spartan intimacy was not a rigid cage that constrained human nature, but rather a carefully constructed framework that allowed human nature to express itself in its most noble form. The Spartans understood that true freedom comes not from the absence of constraints, but from the presence of meaningful purpose. They believed that the person who lives only for their own pleasure is ultimately a slave to their desires, while the person who lives for something greater than themselves achieves a form of freedom that transcends the merely personal. This understanding permeated every aspect of Spartan intimate life, from the way they chose their partners to the way they expressed their affection, from the way they raised their children to the way they honored their ancestors. The Spartan way of love was not easy, for it demanded constant discipline and self-sacrifice, but it was a way that created bonds strong enough to withstand the pressures of war, the challenges of time, and the temptations that had destroyed so many other civilizations. It was a way that produced not only great warriors, but great human beings, people who understood that the highest expressions of human nature come not from indulgence, but from service, not from taking but from giving, not from following one's desires, but from transcending them in pursuit of something greater. As we drift deeper into this exploration of ancient Sparta, we begin to understand that their approach to intimacy was not merely a set of customs or traditions, but a philosophy of human relationship that sought to align the deepest human desires with the highest human purposes. It was a way of loving that created not only personal happiness, but collective strength, not only individual fulfillment, but societal endurance. In the quiet moments between Spartan couples, in the gentle words they shared in the privacy of their homes, in the tender gestures that passed between them, in the spaces between their public duties, we can glimpse something profound about the nature of human love and the possibilities that emerge when it is guided by wisdom rather than mere passion. The discipline that governed Spartan intimate life was not the harsh suppression of human nature, but its careful cultivation, like a skilled gardener who knows that the most beautiful flowers grow not in wild abandon, but under the guidance of a knowing hand. In the chapters that follow, we will explore how this discipline manifested itself in the specific practices and customs that governed Spartan intimate life. But for now, let us simply appreciate the profound understanding that lay at the heart of their approach, that the strongest societies are those where individual desires align with collective needs, where personal love serves public purpose, and where the most intimate moments of human life are understood to be part of a larger tapestry of meaning and purpose that extends far beyond the boundaries of any single life or any single moment. What was intimate practices really like in the ancient Sparta? Chapter 2. The agoge and same-sex bonds. As we continue our gentle journey through the quiet corridors of ancient Sparta, we turn our attention to one of the most profound and complex aspects of Spartan society, the formation of bonds between males within the sacred institution of the agoge. Here, in the hushed training grounds where boys became men, we discover relationships that transcended the simple categories of friendship or mentorship, entering realms of human connection that were both deeply personal and profoundly political. Let your mind settle into this exploration as we examine how the Spartan military system created not just warriors, but intricate webs of emotional and physical bonds that would shape these men throughout their lives. The agoge system of ancient Sparta stands as one of history's most comprehensive and rigorous educational programs, a carefully designed crucible that transformed ordinary boys into the legendary warriors who would defend their city-state for centuries. This system, which began when boys reached the tender age of 7, was far more than mere military training. It was a complete reorganization of human development, a systematic approach to creating not just skilled fighters, but men who were bound together by bonds stronger than blood, deeper than friendship, and more enduring than the bronze of their weapons. When we peer into the quiet hours of the agoge, when the day's harsh training had ended and the boys gathered in the shadows of their barracks, we glimpse the formation of relationships that would define not only their individual lives, but the very character of Spartan society. The moment a young boy was taken from his mother's arms and delivered to the agoge marked the beginning of a transformation that would reshape every aspect of his being. No longer would he know the gentle comfort of a mother's lullaby or the warm security of his family's hearth. Instead, he would learn to find comfort in the presence of his fellow trainees, to seek security in the bonds he would form with the older boys who would guide him through the harsh realities of Spartan training. The agoge was designed to strip away the softness of childhood and replace it with the hardness of the warrior, but in doing so, it created a unique environment where human connections took on forms that would have seemed foreign to the outside world. The barracks where these boys lived were Spartan in every sense of the word, offering little in the way of physical comfort or privacy. The sleeping quarters were simple, with rough beds arranged in close proximity to one another. The dining halls were functional spaces where meals were consumed in silence or quiet conversation. The training grounds were open areas where the boys learned to use weapons, to march in formation, and to endure the rigors of physical conditioning. But it was in the spaces between these formal activities, in the quiet moments when the boys were left to their own devices, that the most profound relationships began to form. The system of mentorship that developed within the agoge was unlike anything that existed in other Greek city-states. Older boys, those who had already proven themselves in training and who had begun to demonstrate the qualities that would make them successful warriors, were assigned to guide and train younger boys who had recently entered the system. This mentorship was not simply a matter of teaching military skills or physical techniques. It was a comprehensive relationship that encompassed every aspect of the younger boy's development, from his physical conditioning to his moral education, from his understanding of Spartan values to his preparation for adult responsibilities. The bonds that formed between these mentors and their charges were intense and multifaceted, combining elements of teaching, protection, companionship, and affection in ways that created relationships of extraordinary depth and complexity. The older boy, known as the Erastes or lover, took on the responsibility of guiding the younger boy, known as the Eromenos or beloved, through the challenges of agoga training. This relationship was understood to be beneficial to both parties. The younger boy received the guidance and protection he needed to survive the rigors of training, while the older boy learned the qualities of leadership and responsibility that would serve him well in adult life. The physical environment of the agoga created conditions that naturally fostered these intense relationships. The boys lived in close quarters, sharing sleeping spaces, dining together, and training together from dawn until dusk. They had little contact with the outside world and no opportunity to form relationships with anyone beyond their fellow trainees. In this isolated environment, the bonds between them became their primary source of emotional support, companionship, and human connection. The older boys who served as mentors became father figures, older brothers, teachers, and protectors, all rolled into one, while the younger boys represented the future of Spartan society, the next generation of warriors who would carry on the traditions and values that their mentors had worked so hard to master. The emotional intensity of these relationships was heightened by the harsh conditions of agoge training. The boys were deliberately subjected to hardship, deprivation, and stress as part of their preparation for warfare. They were given insufficient food, inadequate clothing, and uncomfortable sleeping conditions. They were subjected to physical punishment for mistakes and failures. They were forced to compete against one another in brutal contests of strength, endurance, and skill. In such an environment, the comfort and support provided by a caring mentor could mean the difference between success and failure, between survival and elimination from the program. The physical aspects of these relationships were understood by the Spartans to be a natural outgrowth of the emotional bonds that formed between mentor and student. The Greeks of this era did not share our modern distinctions between different types of love or different forms of physical expression. They understood that human beings naturally seek both emotional and physical connection, and they saw nothing shameful or problematic in the formation of bonds that encompassed both dimensions. The physical intimacy that developed between older and younger boys in the agoge was seen as part of the natural process of human development, a way of expressing affection and creating the deep bonds that would serve the state in times of war. The concept of pederasty, as it was understood in ancient Sparta, was fundamentally different from how we might understand such relationships today. For the Spartans, these relationships were not about the exploitation of youth or the gratification of adult desires. Instead, they were understood to be educational relationships that served important social and military functions. The older boy was expected to be a teacher and protector, someone who would guide the younger boy toward maturity and citizenship. The younger boy was expected to be a student and companion, someone who would learn from his mentor and eventually take on the role of mentor himself. The boundaries between training and attachment in these relationships were deliberately blurred by the Spartan system. The agoge was designed to create warriors who would be willing to die for one another, men who would feel such deep loyalty and affection for their comrades that they would never abandon them in battle. The relationships that formed between mentors and students were seen as the foundation of this military brotherhood, the emotional bonds that would translate into unwavering loyalty on the battlefield. The physical intimacy that developed between them was understood to deepen these bonds, creating connections that would endure long after the formal mentor-student relationship had ended. The training regimen of the Agoge was carefully designed to foster these relationships while also building the physical and mental toughness that would be necessary for warfare. The boys were awakened before dawn each day and immediately subjected to physical conditioning exercises that would build their strength and endurance. They practiced with weapons, learning to use the spear, sword, and shield that would become extensions of their own bodies. They engaged in wrestling matches and foot races, competitions that would determine their standing within the group and their readiness for advancement to the next level of training. But perhaps more importantly, they were subjected to exercises that would test their emotional resilience and their ability to work together as a unit. They were forced to endure hunger, cold, and exhaustion while maintaining their loyalty to their mentors and their fellow trainees. They were required to steal food to supplement their meager rations, but they were severely punished if they were caught, teaching them the importance of stealth and cunning, while also reinforcing the bonds of mutual dependence that existed within their group. They were subjected to ritualized beatings and humiliations that were designed to break down their individual pride and rebuild it as collective identity. Throughout all of these trials, the relationships between mentors and students provided the emotional anchor that allowed the boys to endure and eventually thrive. The older boy who had already survived these trials could offer guidance, encouragement, and comfort to the younger boy who was experiencing them for the first time. The younger boy's struggle and eventual success provided the older boy with a sense of purpose and accomplishment that validated his own suffering and sacrifice. Together, they formed a partnership that was greater than the sum of its parts, a bond that would serve both of them throughout their lives. The mentorship relationships in the Agog were not simply matters of individual choice or personal preference. They were carefully regulated by the authorities who oversaw the training program, men who understood the important role that these relationships played in creating effective warriors. The selection of mentors was based on their demonstrated excellence in training, their embodiment of Spartan values, and their ability to guide and inspire younger students. The pairing of mentors and students was done with careful consideration of their personalities, abilities, and potential for forming productive relationships. The authorities who oversaw the Agoj understood that these relationships could be sources of great strength, but they also recognized that they could become sources of weakness if they were not properly managed. A mentor who became too attached to his student might be tempted to protect him from necessary hardships or to show favoritism that could undermine the principles of the training program. A student who became too dependent on his mentor might fail to develop the independence and self-reliance that would be necessary for survival in battle. The challenge for the authorities was to encourage the formation of deep, meaningful relationships, while also ensuring that these relationships served the larger purposes of the state. The physical intimacy that developed within these relationships was understood to be both natural and beneficial, but it was also subject to certain expectations and limitations. The older boy was expected to be the active partner in any physical relationship, while the younger boy was expected to be receptive but not passive. The relationship was understood to be temporary, lasting only as long as the formal mentorship period, after which both parties would be expected to take on new roles and responsibilities. The older boy would eventually become a full warrior and would be expected to marry and produce children for the state, while the younger boy would eventually become a mentor himself and would guide the next generation of trainees. The transition from student to mentor was one of the most significant rites of passage in Spartan society, marking the young man's evolution from one who receives guidance to one who provides it. This transition was accompanied by rituals and ceremonies that acknowledged the importance of the mentorship relationships and their role in maintaining the continuity of Spartan culture. The young man who had successfully completed his training under the guidance of a mentor was expected to honor that relationship throughout his life, even as he formed new relationships with his own students. The bonds that were formed during the Agog years continued to influence these men throughout their adult lives. The mentorship relationships often evolved into lifelong friendships that provided emotional support, practical assistance, and military cooperation. Former mentors and students would often fight side by side in battle, their deep knowledge of each other's strengths and weaknesses making them formidable partners in combat. They would support each other through the challenges of adult life, offering advice during difficult times and celebrating each other's successes and achievements. The impact of these relationships extended beyond the individuals who participated in them to influence the broader culture of Spartan society. The values of loyalty, mutual support, and collective responsibility that were fostered in the Agoge relationships became defining characteristics of Spartan culture as a whole. The willingness to sacrifice for one's comrades, to place the needs of the group above individual desires, and to maintain unwavering commitment to shared goals became hallmarks of Spartan identity that distinguished them from other Greek city-states. The military effectiveness of the Spartan army was built upon the foundation of these deep personal relationships. Warriors who had trained together, lived together, and formed intimate bonds with one another were far more effective in battle than soldiers who were simply strangers fighting for a common cause. They knew each other's abilities and limitations. They could anticipate each other's actions, and they were willing to take extraordinary risks to protect one another. The phalanx formation that was the signature of Spartan military tactics required this level of coordination and mutual trust, and it was the relationships formed during the Agoge years that made such coordination possible. The intellectual and cultural dimensions of these relationships were as important as their emotional and physical aspects. The older boys who served as mentors were expected to transmit not only military skills, but also the values, traditions, and knowledge that defined Spartan culture. They told stories of great warriors and heroic deeds, taught the songs and poems that celebrated Spartan achievements, and explained the philosophical principles that guided Spartan society. The younger boys who served as students were expected to absorb this cultural knowledge and eventually pass it on to their own students, ensuring the continuity of Spartan tradition across generations. The conversations that took place between mentors and students during the quiet hours of the Agog were perhaps as important as the formal training exercises in shaping the character of future warriors. These were times when the older boy could share his own experiences, his fears and doubts, his hopes and dreams. They were times when the younger boy could ask questions, seek guidance, and begin to understand the complex responsibilities that would soon be his. These conversations created bonds of intellectual and emotional intimacy that complemented the physical aspects of their relationship, creating connections that encompassed the full range of human experience. The privacy that surrounded these relationships was carefully protected by the culture of the Agog. What happened between mentor and student was understood to be a private matter, not subject to outside scrutiny or interference. This privacy allowed the relationships to develop naturally and authentically without the pressure of external expectations or judgments. It also created a sense of specialness and exclusivity that made the relationships more meaningful to those who participated in them. The seasonal rhythms of the Agog created natural cycles of intensity and relaxation in these relationships. During the harsh winter months, when training was most difficult and living conditions were most challenging, the bonds between mentors and students were at their strongest. During the warmer months, when training moved outdoors and living conditions improved, there were more opportunities for recreation and leisure activities that allowed the relationships to develop in different ways. These seasonal variations ensured that the relationships remained dynamic and engaging, evolving and deepening over time. The graduation from the Agog marked the end of the formal mentor-student relationship, but it did not mark the end of the bond between the two individuals. The ceremony that marked this transition was both a celebration of achievement and a recognition of loss, acknowledging that while the young man was ready to take on adult responsibilities, something precious was ending. The relationships that had sustained both mentor and student through the rigors of training would necessarily change as they took on new roles and responsibilities, but the bonds that had been formed would continue to influence their lives in profound ways. As we reflect on these remarkable relationships that developed within the Agog system, we begin to understand how the Spartans created not just individual warriors, but a brotherhood of men who were bound together by bonds of extraordinary depth and complexity. The mentorship relationships that formed during the Agog years were the foundation of Spartan military effectiveness, but they were also the source of the emotional and intellectual richness that made Spartan culture unique among the Greek city-states. In the quiet moments between training exercises, in the gentle conversations that took place in the darkness of the barracks, in the physical expressions of affection that sealed the bonds between mentor and student, we glimpse a society that understood the profound importance of human connection in creating both individual excellence and collective strength. What was intimate practices really like in ancient Sparta? Chapter 3. Women in Sparta, unusual power, unusual expectations. As we continue our gentle exploration through the ancient world of Sparta, we now turn our attention to the remarkable women who inhabited this warrior society. In the soft twilight hours, when the training grounds fell silent and the household fires were lit, Spartan women moved through their world with a confidence and authority that would have seemed impossible to their sisters in other Greek city-states. Here, in the quiet domestic spaces where children were raised and futures were shaped, we discover women who possessed freedoms and wielded power in ways that were extraordinary for their time. Let us settle into this exploration of how Spartan women navigated their unique position in society and how their unusual status shaped the most intimate aspects of their lives. The position of women in ancient Sparta presents one of history's most fascinating paradoxes. While women throughout the Greek world were largely confined to their homes, excluded from public life, and treated as the property of their fathers and husbands, Spartan women enjoyed a degree of freedom and respect that was unprecedented in the ancient world. This freedom was not granted out of progressive ideals or enlightened thinking about gender equality, but rather emerged from the practical necessities of a society organized entirely around warfare. When the men of Sparta spent their lives in military service, often away from home for months or years at a time, the women who remained behind were required to take on responsibilities that would have been unthinkable for women elsewhere in Greece. The unique status of Spartan women began in their earliest years, when they participated in physical training and athletic competitions that were designed to strengthen their bodies and prepare them for the rigors of motherhood. While girls in other Greek city-states were taught to be quiet, submissive, and largely invisible, Spartan girls were encouraged to be strong, confident, and assertive. They ran races through the streets of Sparta, their athletic forms moving with grace and power under the Mediterranean sun. They wrestled and competed in contests of strength and endurance, their bodies becoming as disciplined and capable as those of their male counterparts. These physical activities were not merely recreational pursuits, but were understood to be essential preparation for their future roles as mothers of warriors. The sight of Spartan women engaged in athletic activities was shocking to visitors from other Greek city-states, who were accustomed to seeing women hidden away in the private quarters of their homes. The women of Athens, for example, were expected to remain indoors, their skin pale from lack of sunlight, their bodies soft from lack of exercise. They were taught to speak only when spoken to defer to male authority in all matters, and to find their primary identity in their relationships to the men in their lives. The contrast with Spartan women could not have been more stark. These women moved through public spaces with confidence, their bronze skin testament to their active outdoor lives, their muscled bodies evidence of their physical training and conditioning. The physical strength that Spartan women developed through their athletic training was not merely an aesthetic choice, but was understood to be essential to their primary function in society, producing healthy, strong children who would grow up to be effective warriors. The Spartans understood that weak mothers could not be expected to produce strong offspring, and they structured their society accordingly. The women who bore the next generation of Spartan warriors needed to be physically capable of surviving the rigors of childbirth and psychologically prepared for the challenges of raising children in a society that would demand extraordinary sacrifices from them. The training regimen for Spartan women was carefully designed to build not only physical strength, but also mental resilience. They were taught to endure pain without complaint, to face challenges without fear, and to maintain their composure under pressure. They participated in ritual dances and religious ceremonies that celebrated strength, courage, and endurance. They learned to recite poetry and songs that honored the achievements of Spartan warriors and the sacrifices made by their mothers. Through these activities, they absorbed the values and expectations that would guide their behavior throughout their lives. The educational opportunities available to Spartan women were far more extensive than those provided to women elsewhere in Greece. While women in other city-states were largely excluded from intellectual pursuits, Spartan women were taught to read and write, to understand mathematics and music, and to engage in philosophical discussions about the nature of virtue, courage, and civic duty. They were expected to be knowledgeable about Spartan history and traditions, capable of passing on cultural knowledge to their children, and able to engage in meaningful conversations with their husbands and other members of their community. The economic power wielded by Spartan women was perhaps even more remarkable than their physical and intellectual freedoms. In a society where women elsewhere in Greece could not own property, enter into contracts, or conduct business transactions, Spartan women controlled vast amounts of land and wealth. They inherited property from their fathers and husbands, managed agricultural estates, and made important financial decisions that affected the prosperity of their families and their community. By some estimates, Spartan women controlled as much as 40% of the land in Laconia, making them among the wealthiest and most economically powerful women in the ancient world. This economic independence gave Spartan women a degree of autonomy that was virtually unknown elsewhere in the ancient world. They could make choices about their own lives, influence important decisions within their families, and command respect from men who might otherwise have been inclined to dismiss their opinions. The wealth that they controlled made them valuable allies and dangerous enemies, and it ensured that their voices would be heard in the councils where important decisions were made. Their economic power also gave them significant influence over the marriages of their children, the political alliances of their families, and the social dynamics of their communities. The marriage practices of Spartan women reflected their unique status in society. While women elsewhere in Greece were typically married off as teenagers to men chosen by their fathers, Spartan women were generally older when they married, often in their late teens or early 20s. This delay allowed them to complete their physical and intellectual development before taking on the responsibilities of marriage and motherhood. It also gave them more time to develop their own identities and to form their own opinions about the kind of men they wanted to marry. The process of mate selection in Sparta was far more egalitarian than in other Greek city-states. While the approval of parents was still important, Spartan women had significant input into the choice of their husbands. They could observe potential suitors during public festivals and athletic competitions, where they could assess not only their physical capabilities, but also their character and commitment to Spartan values. The athletic competitions that were central to Spartan culture provided opportunities for young people to interact with each other in settings that allowed for genuine evaluation of compatibility and mutual attraction. The wedding customs of Sparta reflected the unique relationship between men and women in their society. The traditional Greek wedding ceremony, which emphasized the transfer of a woman from her father's household to her husband's, was modified in Sparta to acknowledge the more equal partnership that was expected between husband and wife. The bride was not simply handed over to her husband, but was understood to be entering into a relationship where she would maintain her own identity and authority. The ceremonies that marked these unions celebrated not only the joining of two individuals, but also the creation of a partnership that would serve the interests of the state. The domestic arrangements of Spartan marriages were unlike those found elsewhere in the ancient world. While men in other Greek city-states expected their wives to remain at home, managing household affairs and raising children, Spartan men were often away from home for extended periods due to their military obligations. This meant that Spartan women were frequently in charge of their households, making important decisions about everything from agricultural production to the education of their children. They developed skills in leadership and management that would have been unnecessary for women whose husbands were constantly present to make such decisions. The relationships that developed between Spartan husbands and wives were characterized by a degree of mutual respect and partnership that was rare in the ancient world. The shared commitment to Spartan values created a common ground that allowed couples to work together toward shared goals. The woman's economic independence meant that she was not entirely dependent on her husband for financial security, while the man's frequent absences meant that he was dependent on his wife's competence and loyalty for the management of his affairs. This mutual dependence created relationships that were more balanced and equitable than those found in other Greek city-states. The intimate lives of Spartan couples were shaped by the unique circumstances of their society. The frequent separations caused by military service meant that their time together was precious and intensely valued. The reunions between husband and wife after long absences were occasions of great joy and celebration, moments when the couple could reconnect both emotionally and physically. The physical separation that was a constant feature of Spartan marriage meant that couples had to maintain their relationships through memory, imagination, and the brief but intense periods when they were together. The sexual relationships between Spartan couples were understood to serve multiple purposes. They were expressions of affection and desire, but they were also understood to be civic duties, opportunities to create the next generation of Spartan warriors. The physical strength and health of both partners were seen as essential to the production of healthy offspring, and the emotional bond between them was understood to create the stable environment necessary for raising children with proper Spartan values. The intimate moments between husband and wife were thus understood to be both personal pleasures and public responsibilities. The role of Spartan women as mothers was central to their identity and to their society's survival. The children they bore were not simply their own offspring, but were understood to belong to the state. The famous Spartan mother who told her son to return from battle, either carrying his shield or carried upon it, exemplified the expectation that women would subordinate their maternal instincts to the needs of the state. This did not mean that Spartan mothers loved their children less than mothers elsewhere, but rather that they understood their love to be most nobly expressed through the preparation of their children for service to Sparta. The child-rearing practices of Spartan women were designed to instill the values and characteristics that would make their children successful members of Spartan society. They taught their sons to be brave, disciplined, and loyal, preparing them for the rigors of the agoge and the challenges of military life. They taught their daughters to be strong, intelligent, and independent, preparing them to take on the responsibilities that would be expected of them as Spartan women. The lullabies they sang to their children were not gentle melodies about love and comfort, but stirring songs about courage and honor. The religious and ritual responsibilities of Spartan women were extensive and important. They served as priestesses in the temples, leading religious ceremonies and maintaining the sacred traditions that connected their community to the gods. They participated in festivals and celebrations that marked the changing seasons and commemorated important events in Spartan history. Their knowledge of religious practices and their ability to perform sacred rituals made them essential figures in the spiritual life of their community. The public presence of Spartan women was a constant source of amazement and sometimes scandal to visitors from other Greek city-states. These women walked through the streets of Sparta with confidence and authority, engaging in conversations with men, participating in public discussions, and making their opinions known on important matters. They attended theatrical performances, religious ceremonies, and athletic competitions. Their presence in these public spaces a testament to their respected position in society. Their behavior challenged the assumptions about women's capabilities and proper roles that prevailed throughout the rest of the Greek world. The intellectual pursuits of Spartan women extended beyond the practical skills needed for household management to include serious study of philosophy, poetry, and political theory. They were familiar with the works of Homer and other great poets, and they could discuss the political and military strategies that guided Spartan policy. Their conversations with their husbands and other men were characterized by intellectual equality and mutual respect, with women's opinions being valued and considered in important decisions. The influence of Spartan women on their society extended far beyond their roles as wives and mothers. They were advisors to political leaders, counselors to military commanders, and teachers of the next generation. Their wisdom and judgment were sought after by men who understood that the strength of Sparta depended not only on the courage of its warriors, but also on the intelligence and dedication of its women. The political stability of Sparta was built upon the foundation of strong families, and strong families required strong women who could provide leadership and guidance when their husbands were away. The social gatherings hosted by Spartan women were important venues for the exchange of ideas and the formation of political alliances. The dinner parties and social events that they organized brought together the leading figures of Spartan society, creating opportunities for discussion and debate about important issues. These gatherings were not simply social occasions, but were understood to be important contributions to the political and cultural life of the community. The women who hosted these events wielded considerable influence over the opinions and decisions of the men who attended them. The artistic and cultural contributions of Spartan women were significant and lasting. They were skilled in music, dance, and poetry, and they played important roles in the cultural life of their community. The songs and dances that they performed at public festivals helped to maintain Spartan traditions and to transmit cultural values to the next generation. Their artistic abilities were not merely decorative, but were understood to be essential elements of Spartan culture, contributing to the sense of identity and purpose that bound the community together. The relationships between Spartan women and their servants and slaves were characterized by the same directness and authority that marked all of their interactions. They managed large households with skill and efficiency, directing the work of numerous servants and making important decisions about the allocation of resources. Their authority was recognized and respected by those who worked for them, and they were known for their fairness and competence as managers. The economic prosperity of Spartan families depended upon the management skills of the women who ran their households. The aging process for Spartan women was different from that experienced by women elsewhere in the ancient world. While women in other Greek city-states often found their influence and authority diminishing as they grew older, Spartan women often found their power and respect increasing with age. The wisdom and experience that they accumulated over their lifetimes made them valuable advisors and teachers, and their economic independence ensured that they could maintain their dignity and authority even as their physical strength began to decline. The legacy of Spartan women extended far beyond their own lifetimes. The children they raised went on to become the leaders and defenders of Spartan society, carrying forward the values and traditions that their mothers had instilled in them. The institutions they helped to create and maintain provided the foundation for Spartan political and military success. The example they set of strong, independent women who could balance personal fulfillment with civic duty influenced the development of Greek culture and provided a model that would inspire women throughout the ancient world. As we reflect on the remarkable women of ancient Sparta, we begin to understand how their unique position in society shaped not only their own lives, but the intimate relationships that formed the foundation of Spartan culture. The freedom and power that they enjoyed created possibilities for partnership and equality that were unknown elsewhere in the ancient world. Their strength and independence made them worthy partners for the warriors who defended their city-state, while their wisdom and dedication ensured that the values and traditions of Sparta would be passed on to future generations. In the quiet moments of their domestic lives, in the gentle conversations they shared with their husbands and children, in the strong embrace they offered to those they loved, we glimpse a society that understood the profound importance of empowering women to be full participants in the creation and maintenance of civilization. What was intimate practices really like in ancient Sparta? Chapter 4. Marriage, but not as you know it. As we continue our gentle journey through the intimate customs of ancient Sparta, we now turn to perhaps the most fascinating and mysterious aspect of their society, the institution of marriage and the peculiar rituals that surrounded it. Here, in the shadowed chambers where newlyweds first came together, we discover practices that would seem utterly foreign to our modern understanding of love and matrimony. Let your mind drift back to those ancient wedding nights, when the flickering light of oil lamps illuminated scenes of ritual transformation that marked the beginning of partnerships unlike any others in the ancient world. In these quiet moments of ceremony and symbolism, we glimpse the profound ways in which Spartan society shaped even the most intimate moments of human connection. The approach to marriage in ancient Sparta was as carefully orchestrated as any military campaign, with rituals and customs that reflected the society's deep understanding of how personal relationships could serve the greater good of the state. Unlike the elaborate public ceremonies that marked weddings in other Greek city-states, Spartan marriages began with rituals that were both deeply symbolic and remarkably private. The wedding night itself was not a celebration of romantic love as we might understand it today, but rather a carefully choreographed series of actions designed to transform two individuals into a partnership that would serve the needs of their community while honoring the sacred bonds that would unite them for life. The most striking aspect of Spartan wedding rituals was the transformation that the bride underwent on her wedding night. As the sun set on the day of her marriage, the young woman who had spent years training her body and mind for this moment would submit to a ritual that would mark her transition from maiden to wife. Her long hair, which had been carefully tended and proudly displayed throughout her youth, would be shorn close to her head in a ceremony that was both deeply symbolic and profoundly personal. This cutting of the hair was not merely a cosmetic change, but represented a fundamental transformation of identity, marking the end of one phase of life and the beginning of another. The symbolism of this hair-cutting ritual extended far beyond simple aesthetics. In ancient Greek culture, a woman's hair was considered one of her most beautiful and feminine attributes, a symbol of her youth, fertility, and desirability. By cutting away this symbol of conventional femininity, the Spartan bride was making a statement about the nature of her new role in society. She was declaring that her identity would not be defined by traditional feminine beauty, but by her strength, her intelligence, and her commitment to the values of Spartan society. The shorn hair was a badge of honor, marking her as a woman who had chosen substance over superficial appearance, duty over conventional attractiveness. Following the hair-cutting ceremony, the bride would undergo another transformation that was equally symbolic and even more striking to observers from other Greek city-states. She would exchange her feminine garments for the clothing of a young man, donning a simple tunic and sandals that would make her virtually indistinguishable from a male citizen of Sparta. This cross-dressing was not intended as a form of deception or disguise, but rather as a powerful statement about the nature of Spartan marriage and the equality that was expected to exist between husband and wife. By dressing as a man, the bride was symbolically claiming her right to stand as an equal partner in the marriage, someone who would share not only in the benefits of the union, but also in its responsibilities and challenges. The transformation of the bride's appearance served multiple purposes within the context of Spartan culture. It demonstrated her willingness to subordinate her individual identity to the needs of the state, showing that she understood her role as a wife to be fundamentally different from that of women in other societies. It also served as a test of her husband's commitment to Spartan values, challenging him to look beyond superficial beauty and to appreciate the deeper qualities that would make their marriage successful. The ritual transformation forced both bride and groom to confront the reality that their union was not based on romantic passion alone, but on shared commitment to the ideals and responsibilities of Spartan citizenship. The wedding night itself was conducted with a secrecy and discretion that would have seemed strange to couples in other Greek city-states, where wedding celebrations were often elaborate public affairs that lasted for days. The Spartan bride, with her shorn head and masculine attire, would wait in a darkened chamber for her husband to arrive under cover of darkness. The groom would come to her not in the midst of celebration and revelry, but quietly and secretly, as if he were embarking on a covert mission rather than beginning his married life. This secrecy was not born of shame or embarrassment, but reflected the Spartan understanding that the most important moments of human life are often the most private ones, deserving of reverence and protection from the curious eyes of the world. The clandestine nature of the wedding night meeting established a pattern that would continue throughout the early years of Spartan marriage. Even after they were legally wed, husband and wife would continue to meet in secret, often under cover of darkness, as if they were lovers conducting a forbidden affair rather than a married couple sharing their lawful intimacy. This practice, which would have seemed absurd to couples in other Greek city-states, served important purposes within the context of Spartan society. It maintained the intensity and excitement of their relationship by preventing it from falling into the comfortable routine that could diminish passion and commitment. It also ensured that their time together remained precious and valued, never taken for granted or treated as merely another obligation of married life. The secrecy that surrounded Spartan marriages extended beyond the wedding night to encompass the entire early phase of the relationship. Young married couples were expected to maintain separate living arrangements, with the husband continuing to live in the military barracks and the wife remaining in her family home or establishing her own household. This separation was not a sign of marital discord, but rather a deliberate choice designed to strengthen the bond between husband and wife by ensuring that their time together remained special and meaningful. The anticipation of their secret meetings, the excitement of stolen moments together, and the intensity of their brief encounters served to deepen their emotional connection and maintain the passion that might otherwise have faded with familiarity. The practical arrangements for these secret meetings required careful planning and coordination. the husband would need to slip away from his military duties and his comrades without attracting attention or violating the strict discipline that governed his daily life. The wife would need to prepare for his arrival, ensuring that their meeting place was secure and private, protected from the observation of neighbors and family members. These logistical challenges added an element of adventure and excitement to their relationship, transforming each encounter into a carefully planned operation that required the same skills of stealth and cunning that were valued in military contexts. The physical environment of these secret meetings was carefully designed to enhance their intimacy and significance. The chambers where couples met were often simple and sparsely furnished, with only the basic necessities needed for their encounters. The lighting was dim, provided by oil lamps or candles that cast flickering shadows on the walls and created an atmosphere of mystery and romance. The furnishings were comfortable but not luxurious, emphasizing the focus on the relationship between the two people rather than on material surroundings. These simple settings served to concentrate attention on the emotional and physical connection between husband and wife, stripping away distractions that might diminish the intensity of their time together. The conversations that took place during these secret meetings were as important as the physical intimacy that the couples shared. These were opportunities for husband and wife to share their thoughts, fears, hopes, and dreams without the interference of others or the distractions of daily life. The privacy of their meetings allowed them to speak openly about their feelings, to discuss their concerns about their responsibilities to the state, and to plan for their future together. These conversations served to deepen their emotional bond and to ensure that their relationship remained strong and supportive despite the challenges and separations that their society imposed upon them. The physical intimacy that developed during these secret meetings was understood to be both a personal expression of love and a civic duty. The Spartan couple's sexual relationship was seen as the foundation for the creation of the next generation of citizens, and their physical connection was valued not only for the pleasure it provided, but for its potential to produce healthy, strong children who would serve the state. This understanding did not diminish the romance or passion of their relationship, but rather gave it a deeper significance and purpose that extended beyond their individual happiness to encompass the welfare of their entire community. The symbolic nature of Spartan wedding and marriage rituals extended to every aspect of the couple's relationship. The clothing that the bride wore during the wedding ceremony was not simply a costume but a representation of her new identity and role in society. The secrecy of their meetings was not merely a practical arrangement, but a symbol of the sacred nature of their bond and the respect that their society had for the privacy of intimate relationships. The simple furnishings of their meeting places were not signs of poverty or neglect, but representations of the Spartan values of modesty, functionality, and focus on essential rather than superficial elements. The duration of this secretive phase of Spartan marriage varied depending on the circumstances of the individual couple, but it typically lasted for several years, often until the birth of their first child, or until the husband reached a certain age or rank in the military hierarchy. During this period, the couple would gradually spend more time together, their meetings becoming more frequent and less secretive as their relationship matured and their commitment to each other was proven. The transition from secret meetings to open cohabitation was itself a rite of passage, marking the couple's evolution from newlyweds to established partners in the great enterprise of Spartan society. The public behavior of Spartan couples during the secretive phase of their marriage was carefully regulated by social expectations and customs. Public displays of affection were strongly discouraged, not because physical intimacy was considered shameful, but because such displays were seen as inappropriate and potentially harmful to the social order. The Spartans believed that excessive displays of romantic attachment could weaken a warrior's commitment to his comrades and his duty to the state. They feared that a man who was too obviously devoted to his wife might be reluctant to risk his life in battle, or might show favoritism to his family over his civic responsibilities. The prohibition against public affection extended to all forms of romantic expression, from tender touches to loving words, to obvious signs of sexual attraction. Spartan couples were expected to maintain a dignified reserve in public, treating each other with respect and courtesy, but avoiding any behavior that might suggest that their personal relationship took precedence over their duties to the community. This restraint was not a sign of coldness or lack of feeling, but rather a demonstration of their commitment to Spartan values, and their understanding that true love expresses itself through service to a greater cause, rather than through public displays of emotion. The contrast between the public restraint expected of Spartan couples and the intense intimacy of their private meetings created a unique dynamic in their relationships. The necessity of hiding their affection in public made their private moments together even more precious and meaningful. The knowledge that they must maintain dignified reserve in the presence of others heightened the excitement and intensity of their secret encounters. This tension between public duty and private passion created relationships that were characterized by depth, complexity, and enduring strength. The symbolic elements of Spartan marriage rituals served to reinforce the values and priorities of their society, while also honoring the sacred nature of the bond between husband and wife. The transformation of the bride's appearance was a visible representation of her commitment to Spartan ideals and her willingness to subordinate her individual identity to the needs of the community. The secrecy of their early meetings was an acknowledgement of the sacred nature of intimate relationships and the importance of protecting them from the corrupting influence of public scrutiny. The prohibition against public displays of affection was a demonstration of the couple's understanding that their personal happiness was connected to the welfare of their society, and that true love expresses itself through service to a greater good. The wedding gifts exchanged by Spartan couples were as symbolic and meaningful as the rituals themselves. Rather than the elaborate presents of jewelry, clothing, or household goods that were common in other Greek city-states, Spartan couples typically exchanged simple, practical items that reflected their shared commitment to the values of their society. A husband might give his wife a simple iron ring or a piece of functional pottery, while a wife might give her husband a weapon or a piece of armor. These gifts were not valuable in terms of their material worth, but were precious because of their symbolic significance and their representation of the couple's shared commitment to Spartan ideals. The role of family and friends in Spartan wedding rituals was minimal compared to other Greek city-states, reflecting the society's emphasis on the primary importance of the state over individual relationships. While parents and close friends might be present for some aspects of the wedding ceremony, the most important moments were shared only between the bride and groom, emphasizing the personal nature of their commitment to each other. This focus on the couple themselves, rather than on their families or social networks, reflected the Spartan understanding that marriage was fundamentally a partnership between two individuals who had chosen to bind their lives together in service to their community. The religious aspects of Spartan marriage were as carefully considered as the social and political elements. The couple would make offerings to the gods, particularly to Artemis, the goddess of the hunt and protector of women, and to Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. These religious observances were not mere formalities, but were understood to be essential elements of the marriage ceremony, invoking divine protection and blessing for the union. The prayers and rituals that accompanied these offerings reinforced the sacred nature of the marriage bond and the couple's understanding that their relationship was blessed and protected by the gods. The integration of married couples into the broader social structure of Spartan society was a gradual process that reflected the importance of maintaining strong community bonds while also honoring the special relationship between husband and wife. As couples matured and their marriages became more established, they would take on greater responsibilities within their community, serving as examples and mentors to younger couples and contributing to the social and political life of their city-state. The wisdom and experience that they gained through their own relationship would be shared with others, helping to maintain the traditions and values that made Spartan society unique. The challenges faced by Spartan couples were unique to their society and reflected the particular pressures and expectations that came with their way of life. The frequent separations imposed by military service, the expectation that duty to the state would always take precedence over personal desires, and the pressure to maintain public dignity while nurturing private intimacy all created stresses that required great strength and commitment to overcome. The couples who succeeded in building strong, lasting relationships despite these challenges were those who fully embraced Spartan values and understood that their personal happiness was inseparable from their service to the greater good. As we reflect on the remarkable marriage customs of ancient Sparta, we begin to understand how these rituals and practices served to create relationships that were both deeply personal and profoundly political. The strange wedding night transformations, the secret meetings between husband and wife, and the prohibition against public displays of affection all worked together to create marriages that were characterized by intensity, commitment, and enduring strength. In the quiet moments of their private encounters, in the gentle conversations they shared in the darkness of their secret meeting places, in the symbolic gestures that marked their transformation from individuals to partners, we glimpse a society that understood the profound importance of intimate relationships while never losing sight of the greater purposes that those relationships were meant to serve. Chapter 5. Reproduction as a civic duty. Gentle, contemplative tone throughout. Speak slowly and allow natural pauses as we settle deeper into our exploration of ancient Spartan life. We arrive at perhaps one of the most fascinating and complex aspects of their society. The intimate practices of Sparta were not merely personal matters left to individual choice or romantic inclination. Instead, they formed an integral part of a carefully orchestrated system designed to serve the state's most fundamental need, the creation of strong, capable citizens who could defend and expand Spartan power. Tonight, we delve into the intricate world of Spartan reproduction, where love, desire, and physical intimacy were all carefully channeled toward a single, unwavering purpose. The Spartan state possessed an almost obsessive focus on the creation of what they considered to be superior offspring. This was not a casual concern or a passing policy initiative, but rather the very foundation upon which their entire social structure was built. Every aspect of Spartan life, from childhood education to adult responsibilities, was designed with this ultimate goal in mind. The state did not merely encourage reproduction, it actively managed, directed, and controlled it with a precision that would seem extraordinary even by today's standards. To understand this system fully, we must first appreciate the unique challenges that Sparta faced as a society. Unlike other Greek city-states that could rely on large populations or extensive trade networks, Sparta had chosen a different path. They had built their entire civilization around the concept of military excellence and the subjugation of neighboring peoples. This choice created a constant need for warriors who were not only physically capable, but also mentally prepared for the demanding lifestyle that Spartan citizenship required. The state could not afford to leave such a crucial matter as reproduction to chance or personal preference. The Spartan approach to creating strong offspring began long before conception itself. The state maintained detailed records of family lineages, carefully tracking which bloodlines had produced the most capable warriors and citizens. These records were not merely historical documents, but active tools used in the careful planning of reproductive unions. The concept of genetic potential, while not understood in modern scientific terms, was nevertheless a driving force behind many of the state's decisions regarding who should reproduce with whom. Young Spartan women, unlike their counterparts in other Greek cities, were subjected to rigorous physical training from an early age. This was not simply a matter of general fitness or health, though these were certainly important considerations. The state had determined that physically strong mothers were more likely to produce physically strong children, and every aspect of female education was designed to support this goal. These women engaged in running, wrestling, and various forms of athletic competition, all with the understanding that their primary role would eventually be to bear and raise the next generation of Spartan citizens. The state's involvement in reproduction extended far beyond simple encouragement or general policies. Spartan officials actively arranged marriages and reproductive partnerships based on careful calculations of genetic potential and civic benefit. These arrangements were not made with any consideration for personal attraction, romantic love, or individual preference. Instead, they were strategic decisions made by state officials who evaluated potential partnerships based on the likelihood of producing superior offspring. This systematic approach to reproduction included what we might today recognize as eugenic practices, though the Spartans understood these concepts in their own cultural context. The state actively encouraged reproduction between individuals who had demonstrated exceptional physical strength, mental acuity, or other desirable traits. Conversely, those who showed signs of weakness, disability, or other characteristics deemed undesirable were often discouraged or even prohibited from reproducing. This was not considered cruel or unusual by Spartan standards, but rather a necessary and responsible approach to ensuring the long-term strength of their society. The practice of arranged pairings in Sparta was conducted with a methodical precision that reflected the state's deep commitment to controlled reproduction. These arrangements were not made hastily or based on superficial considerations, but rather followed careful evaluation processes that could take months or even years to complete. State officials would observe potential partners during various activities, noting their physical capabilities, their behavior in challenging situations, and their demonstrated loyalty to Spartan values and traditions. The process of evaluation extended beyond the individuals themselves to include detailed examination of their family histories. Officials would review the military records of fathers and grandfathers, the reproductive success of mothers and grandmothers, and even the behavior and achievements of siblings and cousins. This comprehensive approach ensured that reproductive decisions were made with the fullest possible understanding of the genetic and social potential of any given pairing. Once a pairing had been approved by state officials, the couple was expected to approach their reproductive duties with the same seriousness and dedication they would bring to any other civic responsibility. The act of reproduction was not viewed as a private matter between two individuals, but rather as a service to the state that required careful planning and execution. Couples were provided with guidance on optimal timing, proper nutrition, and other factors that the state believed would contribute to the production of healthy, strong offspring. The Spartan approach to reproduction also included practices that would be considered quite unconventional by the standards of other Greek city-states. The state actively encouraged what we might term extramarital conception, though this practice was governed by strict rules and regulations. If a married couple had not produced children within a reasonable time frame, or if their children were deemed somehow inadequate, the state might arrange for one or both partners to engage in reproductive activities with other selected individuals. This practice of encouraged extramarital conception was not considered adultery or infidelity in the traditional sense, but rather a necessary adaptation to ensure that the state's reproductive goals were met. The primary loyalty of every Spartan citizen was to the state itself, and personal relationships were expected to be subordinate to this greater obligation. A husband might be required to share his wife with another man if that man was deemed more likely to produce superior offspring, and this arrangement was considered not only acceptable but commendable. The state's control over reproduction extended to detailed regulations regarding the timing and circumstances of intimate encounters. Couples were provided with specific guidelines about when reproductive activities should occur, based on the state's understanding of optimal conditions for conception. These guidelines took into account factors such as the physical condition of both partners, the timing of military campaigns, and even seasonal considerations that were believed to influence the health and strength of resulting offspring. The role of sexuality in Spartan society was fundamentally different from that found in other Greek cities. While other cultures might view sexual activity as a source of personal pleasure or as an expression of romantic love, Spartans were taught to understand sexuality primarily as a tool for serving the state. This does not mean that Spartans were prohibited from experiencing pleasure or forming emotional bonds, but rather that these personal experiences were always understood within the larger context of civic duty and state service. The concept of sexuality as service to Sparta was reinforced through various cultural practices and educational programs. Young Spartans were taught from an early age that their bodies belonged not to themselves, but to the state, and that every aspect of their physical existence should be dedicated to strengthening and supporting Spartan society. This included not only their military service and their labor, but also their reproductive capabilities and their intimate relationships. The state's involvement in intimate matters extended to detailed supervision of sexual practices themselves. Spartan officials would sometimes provide specific instructions regarding techniques and approaches that were believed to maximize the likelihood of producing strong, healthy offspring. These instructions were not considered invasive or inappropriate, but rather represented the state's responsible approach to ensuring that its citizens were equipped with the knowledge and skills necessary to fulfill their reproductive duties effectively. The emphasis on reproduction as civic duty also influenced the timing and duration of intimate relationships. Couples were expected to engage in reproductive activities according to schedules that took into account military obligations, agricultural cycles, and other state priorities. A warrior might be required to postpone intimate activities if his military unit was preparing for a campaign, or a woman might be instructed to focus on reproduction during specific periods when the state had determined that additional citizens were particularly needed. The Spartan approach to reproduction included sophisticated methods for monitoring and evaluating the success of their various policies and practices. State officials maintained detailed records of birth rates, infant mortality, and the subsequent development of children born under different circumstances. These records were analyzed to determine which reproductive strategies were most effective, and policies were adjusted accordingly. This systematic approach to evaluation and improvement reflected the Spartan commitment to continuous refinement of their social systems. The practice of state-directed reproduction also included provisions for situations where standard approaches proved unsuccessful. If a couple failed to produce viable offspring, despite multiple attempts, the state might arrange for alternative reproductive partnerships or provide additional resources and support to improve their chances of success. These interventions were not considered failures on the part of the individuals involved, but rather opportunities for the state to demonstrate its commitment to helping all citizens fulfill their reproductive responsibilities. The cultural acceptance of state control over reproduction in Sparta was facilitated by a comprehensive educational system that reinforced these values from early childhood. Children were taught to understand their future reproductive roles as sources of honor and opportunity rather than as burdens or obligations. They learned to take pride in their potential contributions to the strength of Spartan society and to view their intimate relationships as meaningful expressions of their loyalty to the state. The system of state-directed reproduction in Sparta also included recognition and rewards for those who demonstrated exceptional dedication to their reproductive duties. Couples who produced multiple healthy children or whose offspring showed particular promise as future citizens might receive special honors or privileges. These rewards served not only to recognize individual achievement, but also to encourage others to approach their own reproductive responsibilities with similar dedication and success. The complexity of Spartan reproductive practices extended to the integration of these activities with other aspects of social life. Reproductive decisions were coordinated with military planning, agricultural scheduling, and religious observances to ensure that all aspects of Spartan society worked together harmoniously. This comprehensive approach required extensive communication and coordination between different branches of government and various social institutions. The state's commitment to controlled reproduction also influenced Spartan approaches to health and medical care. Particular attention was paid to maintaining the physical condition of individuals during their reproductive years, with specialized medical knowledge and treatments available to address any issues that might interfere with successful conception or childbirth. This medical support was provided not as a personal service, but as a state investment in the future strength of Spartan society. The impact of treating reproduction as civic duty extended beyond the immediate act of creating offspring to include the entire process of child rearing and education. Parents were expected to approach the upbringing of their children with the same systematic dedication they had brought to the act of reproduction itself. Children were viewed not as personal possessions or sources of individual satisfaction, but as future citizens whose development required careful attention and skilled guidance. The Spartan system of reproduction as civic duty also included provisions for dealing with unexpected outcomes or changing circumstances. If a child was born with disabilities or health problems that would prevent them from fulfilling their expected role in society, the state had established procedures for making difficult decisions about their care and future. These decisions were made based on careful evaluation of the child's potential contributions to Spartan society, rather than on emotional attachment or personal preference. The integration of reproductive practices with broader social and political systems in Sparta created a complex web of relationships and obligations that influenced every aspect of daily life. Citizens understood that their personal choices regarding intimate relationships and family planning had implications far beyond their own immediate happiness or satisfaction. Every decision was evaluated in terms of its potential impact on the strength and stability of Spartan society as a whole. The long-term effects of Sparta's approach to reproduction as civic duty can be seen in the remarkable consistency of their social and military systems over many generations. By maintaining strict control over reproductive practices and ensuring that each generation was carefully planned and prepared for their roles as citizens, Sparta was able to maintain its distinctive character and capabilities for centuries. This achievement demonstrates the effectiveness of their systematic approach to social organization and population management. As we reflect on these ancient practices, we are reminded of the profound ways in which social systems can shape the most intimate aspects of human experience. The Spartans created a society in which personal desires and individual preferences were consistently subordinated to collective goals and state objectives. While such an approach might seem restrictive or even oppressive by modern standards, it represented a coherent and effective solution to the challenges faced by their particular form of civilization. The story of Spartan reproduction as civic duty offers us insights into the complex relationships between individual freedom and social responsibility, between personal fulfillment and collective achievement. As we continue our exploration of ancient Spartan life, we will discover how these themes played out in other aspects of their society, creating a civilization that was both remarkably successful and profoundly different from our own contemporary world. In the quiet moments of reflection that follow our examination of these ancient practices, we might consider how the Spartans' systematic approach to reproduction reflects broader questions about the role of the state in personal life, the balance between individual desires and collective needs, and the ways in which societies can organize themselves to achieve their most fundamental goals. These questions remain relevant today as we continue to grapple with the challenges of creating strong, sustainable communities in our own modern world. Chapter 6. The role of women in intimacy. Gentle contemplative tone throughout. Speak slowly and allow natural pauses as we continue our gentle journey through the intricate world of ancient Spartan society. We arrive at a chapter that reveals one of the most fascinating and counterintuitive aspects of their culture. The role of women in intimate relationships within Sparta defied virtually every convention that existed elsewhere in the ancient Greek world. While other Greek city-states relegated women to positions of domestic subservience and social invisibility, Sparta developed a radically different approach that placed women at the center of their reproductive and social systems in ways that would have seemed almost incomprehensible to their contemporaries. The Spartan woman occupied a unique position in the ancient world, one that was shaped by the same military necessities and social priorities that governed every other aspect of their civilization. But unlike the men whose roles were clearly defined by their military service and civic duties, Spartan women navigated a complex landscape of expectations that required them to embody seemingly contradictory qualities. They were expected to be both nurturing mothers and formidable physical specimens, both supportive partners and dominant forces in their intimate relationships. The physical dominance expected of Spartan women was not merely a cultural preference or an abstract ideal, but a practical necessity that grew directly from the state's commitment to producing superior offspring. The Spartans had observed, through generations of careful attention to reproductive outcomes, that physically strong mothers were more likely to produce physically strong children. This observation led them to develop a comprehensive system of female education and conditioning that was unlike anything found elsewhere in the ancient world. From the earliest stages of childhood, Spartan girls were subjected to the same rigorous physical training that shaped their male counterparts. They ran through the countryside, wrestled with their peers, and engaged in various forms of athletic competition that developed their strength, endurance, and physical capabilities. This training was not considered unusual or inappropriate by Spartan standards, but rather an essential preparation for their future roles as mothers and partners. The state invested considerable resources in ensuring that every Spartan woman possessed the physical attributes necessary to fulfill her reproductive responsibilities effectively. The expectation of physical dominance extended far beyond simple athletic ability to encompass a complex understanding of feminine power that was uniquely Spartan. These women were taught to view their physical strength not as a deviation from feminine norms, but as the highest expression of their feminine nature. They learned to take pride in their ability to outrun, outwrestle, and outperform women from other Greek cities, understanding that their physical capabilities were direct reflections of their value to Spartan society. The training regimen for Spartan women included not only individual physical conditioning, but also group activities that fostered competition and mutual improvement. Young women would compete against each other in various athletic contests, with the winners receiving recognition and rewards that reinforced the value placed on physical excellence. These competitions were not merely recreational activities, but serious evaluations of each woman's potential contribution to the state's reproductive goals. The cultural emphasis on female physical dominance created a unique dynamic in Spartan intimate relationships. Unlike other Greek societies where men were expected to be the physically superior partners, Spartan couples often found themselves in relationships where the woman possessed equal or even superior physical capabilities. This reversal of traditional gender roles required both partners to develop new approaches to intimacy and partnership that took into account the woman's strength and capabilities. The concept of fertility tests represented another distinctive aspect of Spartan approaches to female sexuality and reproduction. These evaluations were not simple medical examinations, but comprehensive assessments of a woman's potential to bear and raise healthy children. The tests included physical examinations, strength assessments, and evaluations of various biological markers that the Spartans believed indicated reproductive potential. Women who performed well in these tests were considered highly desirable partners, while those who showed signs of weakness or reproductive difficulties might find their marriage prospects significantly diminished. The fertility testing process was conducted with the same systematic thoroughness that characterized all aspects of Spartan social organization. State officials would observe women during various physical activities, noting their endurance, their recovery from exertion, and their overall physical condition. These observations were recorded and analyzed to create detailed profiles of each woman's reproductive potential. The information gathered during these evaluations was used not only to arrange marriages, but also to determine which women should be encouraged to bear multiple children and which might be better suited for other forms of service to the state. The Spartan emphasis on strength-based attraction created a unique aesthetic that differed dramatically from the beauty standards found in other Greek cities. While other cultures might value delicate features, pale skin, or other signs of a sheltered lifestyle, Spartans were attracted to women who displayed obvious signs of physical strength and capability. Muscular builds, sun-darkened skin, and athletic prowess were considered highly desirable traits that indicated a woman's potential value as a partner and mother. This strength-based approach to attraction was not limited to physical appearance, but extended to demonstrations of capability and endurance. Spartan men were taught to evaluate potential partners based on their performance in athletic competitions, their ability to endure physical challenges, and their demonstrated commitment to physical excellence. A woman who could outperform her peers in running or wrestling was considered far more attractive than one who possessed conventional beauty but lacked physical strength. The cultural preference for strength-based attraction had profound implications for the development of intimate relationships in Sparta. Couples were drawn together not by romantic ideals or aesthetic preferences, but by mutual respect for each other's physical capabilities and potential contributions to their shared reproductive goals. This created relationships that were based on practical considerations and shared values rather than on emotional attraction or personal compatibility. The phenomenon of masculine women and feminine men in Spartan society created what we might recognize as a fascinating cultural paradox. While other Greek cities maintained strict gender roles that emphasized the differences between men and women, Sparta developed a system that seemed to blur these distinctions in significant ways. Spartan women were encouraged to develop qualities that other cultures considered masculine, while Spartan men were expected to appreciate and value these qualities in their partners. This cultural paradox was not accidental, but rather the result of deliberate social engineering designed to optimize reproductive outcomes. The Spartans had determined that the traditional Greek model of feminine weakness and masculine dominance was not conducive to producing the type of offspring they desired. Instead, they developed a system that emphasized strength and capability in both sexes, creating partnerships between individuals who were both physically and mentally prepared for the challenges of raising future citizens. The development of masculine traits in Spartan women was facilitated by educational and social systems that actively encouraged these qualities. Young women were taught to be competitive, aggressive, and physically dominant in ways that would have been considered shocking in other Greek cities. They learned to speak boldly, to assert their opinions, and to demand respect from their male counterparts. This training was not intended to eliminate feminine qualities, but rather to supplement them with attributes that would enhance their effectiveness as mothers and partners. The corresponding development of what might be termed feminine qualities in Spartan men was a more subtle but equally important aspect of their social system. Spartan men were taught to appreciate and value the strength and capabilities of their female partners rather than feeling threatened or diminished by these qualities. They learned to see their relationships as partnerships between equals rather than as arrangements between dominant and subordinate individuals. The cultural paradox of masculine women and feminine men was perhaps most clearly visible in the realm of intimate relationships themselves. Spartan couples were expected to approach their physical relationships with mutual respect and shared responsibility. Neither partner was expected to be entirely dominant or entirely submissive, but rather both were encouraged to contribute their unique strengths and capabilities to the relationship. This created intimate dynamics that were far more complex and nuanced than those found in other Greek societies. The role of Spartan women in intimate relationships was further complicated by the state's expectations regarding their behavior and deportment. While they were encouraged to be physically strong and mentally assertive, they were also expected to channel these qualities in ways that served the state's reproductive goals. This required a delicate balance between personal expression and social responsibility that few other cultures demanded of their female citizens. The training and education provided to Spartan women included instruction in various aspects of intimate relationships and reproductive responsibilities. Unlike other Greek cities where such matters were left to chance or learned through informal networks, Sparta provided systematic education that ensured every woman understood her role and responsibilities. This education covered not only the physical aspects of reproduction, but also the psychological and social dimensions of intimate relationships. The comprehensive approach to female education in Sparta included training in leadership and decision-making that prepared women for their roles as partners in intimate relationships. Spartan women were taught to evaluate potential partners, to make informed decisions about reproductive timing, and to manage the complex social dynamics that surrounded intimate relationships in their society. This education was considered essential preparation for their future responsibilities as mothers and citizens. The state's investment in female education and training reflected their understanding that women played a crucial role in the success of their social system. Unlike other Greek cities that viewed women primarily as property or domestic servants, Sparta recognized that women were active participants in the creation and maintenance of their civilization. This recognition led to the development of educational and social systems that were specifically designed to maximize female potential and contribution. The unique position of women in Spartan intimate relationships also influenced the development of their social and political systems. Because women were expected to be strong and capable partners, they were also given greater voice in family decisions and social matters. This created a dynamic where women's opinions and preferences carried significant weight in determining the direction of relationships and the upbringing of children. The emphasis on female physical dominance in Sparta also created interesting dynamics around the concept of protection and security. While men in other Greek cities were expected to protect their women from physical danger, Spartan women were often capable of protecting themselves and their families. This created relationships where both partners contributed to the physical security of the household, rather than relationships where one partner was entirely dependent on the other for protection. The cultural acceptance of strong, dominant women in Sparta extended beyond intimate relationships to influence broader social interactions. Spartan women were known throughout the Greek world for their boldness, their physical capabilities, and their willingness to express their opinions on matters of public importance. This reputation was not considered shameful or inappropriate by Spartan standards, but rather a source of pride that reflected the effectiveness of their social system. The long-term effects of Sparta's approach to female roles and intimacy can be seen in the remarkable stability and effectiveness of their reproductive system over many generations. By creating a culture that valued and nurtured female strength and capability, Sparta was able to maintain high birth rates and produce generations of physically and mentally capable citizens. This achievement demonstrates the effectiveness of their unconventional approach to gender roles and intimate relationships. The contrast between Spartan women and their counterparts in other Greek cities was so dramatic that it often became a source of commentary and criticism from contemporary observers. Writers and philosophers from other cities frequently expressed amazement, disapproval, or fascination with the behavior and capabilities of Spartan women. These external reactions provide valuable insights into just how unusual and revolutionary the Spartan approach to female roles actually was. The psychological dimensions of intimate relationships in Sparta were also influenced by the unique roles assigned to women. Because women were expected to be strong and capable partners, intimate relationships developed along lines that emphasized mutual respect and shared responsibility. This created emotional dynamics that were quite different from those found in other Greek societies, where relationships were often characterized by male dominance and female submission. The training provided to Spartan women included not only physical conditioning but also psychological preparation for their roles as partners and mothers. Women were taught to understand their own value and importance, to take pride in their capabilities, and to expect respect from their partners. This psychological preparation was considered essential for creating the type of intimate relationships that would serve the state's reproductive goals effectively. The cultural paradox of masculine women and feminine men in Sparta also influenced their approaches to child rearing and family life. Because both parents were expected to embody both strength and nurturing qualities, children were exposed to a more complex and nuanced understanding of gender roles than was common in other Greek cities. This exposure prepared them for their own future roles as partners and parents in the unique social system that Sparta had created. The integration of female physical dominance into Spartan intimate relationships required the development of new social norms and expectations that guided behavior in various situations. These norms addressed questions such as how couples should interact in public, how they should make decisions about family matters, and how they should divide responsibilities within the household. The development of these norms was a gradual process that evolved over many generations of Spartan social experience. The success of Sparta's approach to female roles and intimacy can be measured not only by their reproductive outcomes, but also by the stability and longevity of their social system. By creating a culture that valued and utilized the full potential of all its citizens, regardless of gender, Sparta was able to maintain its distinctive character and capabilities for centuries. This achievement represents one of the most remarkable social experiments in human history. As we reflect on these ancient practices and their implications, we are reminded of the profound ways in which social systems can shape the most intimate aspects of human experience. The Spartans created a society that challenged virtually every assumption about gender roles and intimate relationships that existed in their time. While their approach might seem strange or even radical by contemporary standards, it represented a coherent and effective solution to the challenges they faced as a civilization. The story of Spartan women and their role in intimate relationships offers us valuable insights into the flexibility and adaptability of human social systems. It demonstrates that there are many different ways to organize intimate relationships and gender roles, and that the most effective approaches are often those that are specifically adapted to the needs and circumstances of particular societies. As we continue our exploration of ancient Spartan life, we will discover how these themes played out in other aspects of their culture, creating a civilization that was both remarkably successful and profoundly different from our own contemporary world. Chapter 7: Same-sex relationships among women. Gentle, contemplative tone throughout. I speak slowly and allow natural pauses. As we delve deeper into the quiet mysteries of ancient Spartan society, we encounter one of the most intriguing and elusive aspects of their intimate culture. The relationships between women in Sparta existed in a realm that was both deeply significant and remarkably undocumented, creating a fascinating puzzle for those who seek to understand the complete picture of intimate life in this extraordinary civilization. The bonds that formed between Spartan women were shaped by the same unique social conditions that influenced every other aspect of their society, yet they developed in ways that were largely hidden from the historical record. The absence of husbands created a distinctive social environment that profoundly influenced the development of relationships between Spartan women. Unlike other Greek societies where women spent their lives in relative isolation within domestic spaces, Spartan women found themselves in a world where male companionship was sporadic and often temporary. The demands of military service meant that Spartan men were frequently away from home for extended periods, participating in campaigns, training exercises, or garrison duties that could last for months or even years at a time. This regular absence of male partners created a social vacuum that Spartan women filled through the development of intense and meaningful relationships with one another. These relationships were not merely casual friendships or temporary arrangements, but rather deep and lasting bonds that provided emotional support, physical companionship, and intellectual stimulation during the long periods when traditional heterosexual partnerships were impossible to maintain. The women of Sparta created their own social networks and support systems that operated largely independently of male oversight or involvement. The physical training and athletic activities that were central to Spartan women's education created natural opportunities for the development of close relationships between female companions. Unlike women in other Greek cities who rarely engaged in physical activities or public gatherings, Spartan women spent considerable time together in gymnasiums, training grounds, and athletic competitions. These shared experiences of physical challenge and achievement created bonds that were both practical and emotional, as women supported each other through the difficulties of their demanding training regimens. The communal nature of female athletic training in Sparta fostered an environment where women could develop deep appreciation for each other's physical capabilities and personal qualities. They observed each other's dedication, witnessed each other's struggles and triumphs, and developed intimate knowledge of each other's strengths and vulnerabilities. This intimate familiarity, combined with the extended periods of time spent together, created the foundation for relationships that transcended simple friendship or casual acquaintance. The athletic culture that surrounded Spartan women also created a unique aesthetic appreciation that influenced their relationships with one another. These women were trained to recognize and value physical strength, endurance, and skill in ways that were foreign to women in other Greek societies. They developed the ability to appreciate the beauty of muscular development, the grace of athletic movement, and the appeal of physical competence. This aesthetic appreciation provided another dimension to their relationships, adding layers of admiration and attraction that were both intellectual and physical. The close physical proximity required by athletic training and competition created opportunities for intimate contact that were both natural and socially acceptable. Spartan women engaged in wrestling, running, and other physical activities that required them to touch, support, and interact with each other in ways that would have been considered inappropriate in other Greek societies. This physical intimacy was normalized within the context of their athletic culture, creating an environment where close physical relationships could develop without attracting unwanted attention or social disapproval. The shared experiences of physical challenge and achievement also created emotional bonds that were intensely personal and deeply meaningful. Women who trained together, competed against each other, and supported each other through the difficulties of their demanding physical regimens developed connections that were based on mutual respect, shared struggle, and common goals. These emotional connections provided the foundation for relationships that could sustain both partners through the challenges and uncertainties of Spartan life. The educational system that prepared Spartan women for their roles as mothers and citizens also created opportunities for intellectual and emotional intimacy between female companions. Unlike other Greek cities where women received minimal formal education, Spartan women were taught to read, write, and engage in sophisticated discussions about politics, philosophy, and social issues. This intellectual development created common ground for deep and meaningful conversations that could sustain long-term relationships. The intellectual companionship that developed between educated Spartan women was particularly significant given the limited opportunities for such relationships with male partners. While Spartan men were certainly capable of intelligent conversation, their frequent absences and their focus on military concerns meant that women often found their most stimulating intellectual exchanges with other women. These intellectual connections provided yet another foundation for the development of close and lasting relationships between female companions. The social acceptance of close female relationships in Sparta was facilitated by the practical necessities of their society. The state recognized that women needed emotional support and companionship during the long periods when their husbands were absent, and they understood that strong relationships between women could contribute to the overall stability and effectiveness of their social system. This practical acceptance created an environment where women could develop close relationships without fear of social condemnation or official disapproval. The potential for intimate relationships between Spartan women was further supported by the privacy and autonomy that these women enjoyed compared to their counterparts in other Greek cities. Spartan women were not confined to domestic spaces or subjected to constant male supervision, which meant that they had opportunities to spend time together in private settings where intimate relationships could develop and flourish. This freedom of movement and association was crucial for the development of the close bonds that characterized relationships between Spartan women. The silence in the historical records regarding intimate relationships between Spartan women is both tantalizing and significant. While ancient sources provide detailed descriptions of male homosexual relationships in Sparta and other Greek cities, they offer remarkably little information about similar relationships between women. This silence could reflect the general tendency of ancient historians to focus on male activities and ignore female experiences, but it might also indicate that these relationships were considered so normal and accepted that they did not warrant special comment or documentation. The absence of detailed records about intimate relationships between Spartan women forces us to rely on inference and speculation based on the social conditions that existed in their society. The evidence suggests that these relationships were not only possible but likely, given the combination of factors that encouraged close bonds between women. The extended absences of male partners, the intimate nature of athletic training, the intellectual companionship fostered by education, and the social acceptance of close female relationships all created conditions that were conducive to the development of intimate partnerships between women. The potential concealment of intimate relationships between Spartan women in the historical record may also reflect the different social attitudes toward female sexuality that existed in ancient Greek culture. While male homosexual relationships were often celebrated and documented as expressions of noble love and intellectual companionship, female sexuality was generally viewed as more mysterious and less worthy of detailed examination. This cultural bias may have contributed to the silence surrounding intimate relationships between Spartan women, even if such relationships were common and accepted within their society. The religious and cultural practices of Sparta also provided contexts where intimate relationships between women could develop and be expressed. The worship of various goddesses, particularly Artemis and Athena, created opportunities for women to gather together in religious ceremonies and festivals that celebrated feminine strength and independence. These religious gatherings provided both practical opportunities for women to spend time together and cultural frameworks that celebrated the value of relationships between women. The festivals and religious observances that honored female deities in Sparta often included activities that encouraged close bonds between women participants. These might include ritual dances, athletic competitions, or ceremonial activities that required cooperation and coordination between female participants. The shared experience of religious devotion and ceremonial participation created additional opportunities for the development of intimate relationships between women who might not otherwise have had extensive contact with each other. The cult of Artemis, which was particularly important in Spartan religious life, provided a specific framework for understanding and celebrating relationships between women. Artemis was associated with female independence, physical prowess, and the rejection of traditional feminine roles, all qualities that were highly valued in Spartan society. The worship of Artemis created a cultural context where intimate relationships between women could be understood as expressions of divine feminine power rather than as deviations from social norms. The potential for intimate relationships between Spartan women was also supported by the practical arrangements of their daily lives. The communal nature of many activities, the shared living spaces that were common in Spartan society, and the extended periods of time that women spent together all created opportunities for close relationships to develop. These practical circumstances, combined with the emotional and intellectual needs that arose from the frequent absence of male partners, created conditions that were highly conducive to the formation of intimate bonds between women. The economic independence that Spartan women enjoyed compared to their counterparts in other Greek cities also contributed to their ability to form and maintain intimate relationships with other women. Spartan women could own property, manage their own affairs, and make independent decisions about their personal lives in ways that were impossible for women in other Greek societies. This economic autonomy provided the practical foundation for relationships that were based on mutual choice and shared affection rather than on economic necessity or social obligation. The training in physical combat and self-defense that was part of Spartan women's education also created opportunities for the development of intimate relationships based on mutual protection and support. Women who had been trained to defend themselves and others could form partnerships that provided both emotional intimacy and practical security. These relationships might have served as mutual protection societies, where women looked out for each other's safety and well-being during the dangerous periods when male protectors were absent. The artistic and cultural expressions that were part of Spartan women's education also provided outlets for the expression of intimate feelings and relationships. Women were taught to compose poetry, participate in musical performances, and engage in other cultural activities that could serve as vehicles for expressing their feelings about other women. While few examples of such expressions have survived in the historical record, the existence of these cultural outlets suggests that intimate relationships between women were not only accepted but actively supported by Spartan society. The potential for intimate relationships between Spartan women was further enhanced by the relatively relaxed attitudes toward physical expression and emotional intimacy that characterized their society. Unlike other Greek cities, where women were expected to maintain strict emotional reserve and physical distance, Spartan women were encouraged to express their feelings openly and to engage in physical contact with others. This cultural openness created an environment where intimate relationships could develop naturally and be expressed freely. The silence in the historical records regarding intimate relationships between Spartan women may also reflect the success of these relationships in serving the broader goals of Spartan society. If these relationships provided emotional support, intellectual companionship, and practical assistance that helped women fulfill their roles as mothers and citizens, they would have been valued by the state, even if they were not explicitly documented or celebrated. The lack of official condemnation or restriction suggests that these relationships were seen as beneficial rather than problematic. The legacy of intimate relationships between Spartan women can be seen in the remarkable strength and independence that characterized these women throughout their history. The bonds that developed between female companions provided emotional and practical support that enabled Spartan women to thrive in a society that made extraordinary demands on their time, energy, and capabilities. These relationships contributed to the overall success of the Spartan system by ensuring that women had the support they needed to fulfill their various roles and responsibilities. The potential concealment of intimate relationships between Spartan women in the historical record also raises important questions about the ways in which female experiences have been documented and preserved throughout history. The silence surrounding these relationships may reflect broader patterns of historical neglect and cultural bias that have obscured many aspects of women's lives in ancient societies. This silence reminds us that the absence of evidence is not necessarily evidence of absence, and that many important aspects of ancient life may have been lost to historical neglect. As we contemplate the quiet mysteries of intimate relationships between Spartan women, we are reminded of the complex and multifaceted nature of human connection and affection. The bonds that developed between these women were shaped by the unique circumstances of their society, but they also reflected universal human needs for companionship, understanding, and emotional support. The silence that surrounds these relationships in the historical record only adds to their mystery and significance, suggesting depths of human experience that remain largely unexplored and unacknowledged. The story of intimate relationships between Spartan women offers us valuable insights into the ways in which social conditions can create opportunities for different forms of human connection and affection. It demonstrates that intimate relationships can develop in many different contexts and take many different forms, all of which can contribute to human happiness and social stability. As we continue our exploration of ancient Spartan life, we carry with us an appreciation for the complex and varied ways in which human beings have sought and found intimacy, companionship, and love throughout history. Chapter 8. Infidelity, Affairs, and Polyamory. State-approved, gentle, contemplative tone throughout Myers speaks slowly and allow natural pauses. As our journey through the intimate landscape of ancient Sparta continues, we encounter perhaps the most counterintuitive aspect of their approach to relationships and sexuality. In a world where most ancient societies held strict views about marital fidelity and exclusive partnerships, Sparta developed a remarkably different perspective that challenged virtually every assumption about intimate relationships that existed in their time. The Spartan approach to what we might today call infidelity, affairs, and polyamory was not born from moral laxity or social chaos, but rather from a carefully calculated understanding of how alternative relationship structures could serve their broader social and political goals. The unusual openness around shared partners in Spartan society was not an accident or an oversight, but rather a deliberate policy that reflected their deep commitment to optimizing reproductive outcomes. The Spartan state had observed that exclusive monogamous relationships, while emotionally satisfying for the individuals involved, did not always produce the strongest or most numerous offspring that their society required. This observation led them to develop policies and practices that actively encouraged more flexible approaches to intimate relationships, even when these approaches conflicted with the moral standards of other Greek cities. The concept of shared partners in Sparta was governed by complex social rules and expectations that ensured these arrangements served the state's interests while minimizing potential conflicts between the individuals involved. Unlike the chaotic or secretive affairs that might occur in other societies, Spartan shared partnerships were often openly acknowledged and socially approved arrangements that had been carefully planned and coordinated by state officials or family members. These arrangements were not considered shameful or immoral, but rather practical solutions to the challenges of maintaining a strong and growing population. The state's approval of shared partnerships was based on their understanding that genetic diversity was crucial for producing strong offspring. The Spartans had noticed that children born from relationships between partners from different family lines or different regions often displayed superior physical and mental qualities compared to those born from more closely related parents. This observation led them to actively encourage partnerships that would maximize genetic diversity, even if these partnerships violated traditional concepts of marital exclusivity. The practical implementation of shared partnerships in Sparta required the development of sophisticated social mechanisms that could manage the complex emotional and practical challenges that arose from these arrangements. The state provided guidance and support for individuals who were participating in shared partnerships, helping them navigate the difficulties of managing multiple relationships while maintaining their primary responsibilities to their families and communities. This support system was essential for ensuring that shared partnerships contributed to social stability rather than undermining it. The unusual openness around shared partners also reflected the Spartan understanding that emotional and physical needs could be met through different relationships in ways that strengthened rather than weakened the overall social fabric. They recognized that individuals might form deep emotional bonds with one partner while maintaining physical relationships with others, and that these different types of connections could complement each other rather than competing for the individual's attention and loyalty. This sophisticated understanding of human psychology and relationship dynamics was far ahead of its time. The social acceptance of shared partnerships in Sparta was facilitated by their unique approach to marriage and family structure. Unlike other Greek societies, where marriage was primarily a religious or emotional bond between two individuals, Spartan marriage was understood as a social contract that served specific practical purposes. This practical understanding of marriage made it easier for individuals to accept and participate in arrangements that might include multiple partners, as long as these arrangements served the broader goals of the partnership. The state's involvement in arranging and managing shared partnerships extended to detailed considerations of compatibility, timing, and practical logistics. Officials would evaluate potential participants based on their physical and mental qualities, their existing family obligations, and their demonstrated ability to manage complex social relationships. These evaluations ensured that shared partnerships were formed between individuals who were likely to work well together and produce positive outcomes for all involved. The concept of state-approved infidelity in Sparta represented a radical departure from the moral frameworks that governed most ancient societies. What other cultures might condemn as adultery or betrayal was actively encouraged in Sparta when it served the state's reproductive goals. This approach required individuals to develop new ways of thinking about loyalty, commitment, and fidelity that prioritized collective benefit over individual emotional satisfaction. The success of this approach demonstrated the remarkable adaptability of human social behavior when it is properly guided and supported. The reasons why traditional concepts of cheating were not always condemned in Sparta were deeply rooted in their understanding of individual and collective responsibility. The Spartans believed that every citizen's primary loyalty was to the state, and that personal relationships should be structured to serve this greater good. This philosophical framework made it possible for individuals to engage in what other societies might consider infidelity without experiencing the guilt or social condemnation that would typically accompany such behavior. The state's tolerance for non-exclusive relationships was also based on their recognition that human sexuality and emotional needs were complex and varied. They understood that some individuals might be better suited for multiple relationships, while others might thrive in more exclusive arrangements. Rather than imposing a single model of relationship structure on all citizens, they developed a flexible system that could accommodate different personality types and relationship preferences while still serving the state's broader goals. The practical implementation of state-approved, non-exclusive relationships required the development of clear guidelines and expectations that helped individuals navigate the complex social dynamics involved. These guidelines addressed questions such as how time and resources should be divided between different partners, how children from different relationships should be raised and supported, and how conflicts between different partners should be resolved. The existence of these guidelines demonstrated the state's commitment to making these arrangements work effectively for all involved. The laws encouraging multiple fathers for stronger children represented perhaps the most radical aspect of Spartan approach to intimate relationships. These laws were based on the belief that children who had biological connections to multiple strong men would inherit the best qualities from each of their potential fathers. This belief led to the development of practices that actively encouraged women to engage in relationships with multiple men during their reproductive years, with the understanding that the resulting children would benefit from this genetic diversity. The implementation of laws encouraging multiple fathers required careful coordination between all parties involved to ensure that the arrangements served everyone's interests effectively. Women who participated in these arrangements needed to manage relationships with multiple men while maintaining their primary family responsibilities. Men needed to accept and support children who might not be their biological offspring, while also contributing to the upbringing of children who were definitely their own. The success of these arrangements required exceptional levels of communication, cooperation, and mutual respect. The biological theories that underlied the laws encouraging multiple fathers were remarkably sophisticated for their time. The Spartans had observed that children often displayed characteristics that seemed to come from multiple sources, and they developed explanations for these observations that led them to believe that exposure to multiple men during conception and early development could enhance a child's overall qualities. While these theories were not scientifically accurate by modern standards, they represented serious attempts to understand and optimize human reproduction. The social acceptance of multiple fathers for individual children was facilitated by the Spartan understanding that parenthood was primarily a social rather than a biological relationship. They believed that the most important aspects of raising children were providing proper education, training, and moral guidance, and that these responsibilities could be effectively shared among multiple adults. This understanding made it easier for men to accept and support children who might not be their biological offspring, as they understood that their role as social fathers was equally important. The practical challenges of managing families with multiple potential fathers were addressed through comprehensive social support systems that helped coordinate the various relationships and responsibilities involved. The state provided guidance on how resources should be shared, how decisions about children's upbringing should be made, and how conflicts between different adults should be resolved. These support systems were essential for ensuring that children received consistent care and guidance despite the complexity of their family structures. The laws encouraging multiple fathers also reflected the Spartan understanding that strong communities required strong individuals, and that strong individuals were most likely to emerge from environments where they had access to multiple role models and sources of support. By encouraging arrangements where children had connections to multiple adult men, the state was attempting to create social environments that would maximize each child's